Now, I don't know if anyone's noticed, right? But there's a bit of a panic at the moment about what's going to happen when the bills go up. Right? I did a segment the other day about Martin Lewis talking about there's going to be a possible 73% increase in people's bills, could be up to £500 a month for some people on their energy bills, which is quite frankly ridiculous. As of general putting the price up, as we've seen the last kind of within coverage of the Conservative leadership election, there's been a huge amount of focus on some things about the cost of living crisis, right? And this inflation that's happening in the energy sector that's given plenty of other sectors the excuse to be able to put up the prices moving forward. So it's really so the costs are coming everywhere, and but the basic things are going to be the things that people are going to have trouble paying, right? Like trouble paying their energy bills, they're paying their rent, buying food. So people are naturally pretty upset about that, especially at a time in which companies like Shell, companies like Centrica, companies like BP are seeing twofold, threefold, fivefold increase in profits, raking in billions of pounds every year. And or in the last like 3 months or so, billions of excess profits in the last 3 months, which means that all of that extra money that you're paying, you're worrying paying in your bills, right? That is going to keep these people in Rolexes, right? Let's not forget where this money is going. And the steps that government are taking to mitigate this issue are just on our end, right? They're essentially spending government money to prop up those profits at the same time. People are increasingly worried, right? Martin Lewis himself, he has spoken out many times on TV, on radio, on all these different places about the possibility of there being civil unrest, civil disobedience. One thing he's mentioned is the idea of a consumer strike. Right now, he's had this in his mentions quite a lot, so that's why he's brought it up. And it's the campaign by people called Don't Pay UK. I'm sure you've seen this around social media if you've been paying plenty of attention. They've been getting loads of traction. They've only been around since June, so it's only a new less than 3 months. They're already on 70,000 Twitter followers. They've got 50k followers on TikTok, 40k on Instagram. This is a really big, really kind of growing movement, right? And their central plan is a consumer strike on payment of energy bills, especially for those on direct debit, because those are the ones who can cancel their payments. People on prepaid meters are going to be out of luck for this. But at any rate, the idea isn't really to just stop paying, right? It's really about having the amount of people behind the movement that you do to be able to have that pledge to not pay to threaten the energy companies to be able to deal with the issue, right? Once you have a larger enough group of people who are going to engage in a consumer strike, it doesn't actually really matter anymore um, whether or not you actually go ahead with it, because what's actually most likely is that once you understand that there will be people there to do it, the energy companies will relent and they will not do as high as the price cap, or the government will have to step in to make sure that this doesn't actually come to pass, to impact the cash flow, to impact um, the abilities of these energy companies to be able to engage in any kind of revenue protection on their end, right? If a million people stop paying, right, you can't just send collection notices out to a million people at once. That's going to overload their ability to be able to deal with that. And as they say here, millions of us won't be able to afford bills this winter. We can't afford to let that happen. We demand a reduction of bills to affordable level. We will cancel our direct debits from October the 1st if we are ignored. The campaign starts now with your help. Incredibly simple message, and everyone gets on board with this. Now, there are some issues, right? So I've been mainly interacting with this kind of stuff on TikTok as the platform where I've seen a lot of the discussion around this, as opposed to on Facebook and Twitter. Now, the responses to this have been mixed. The main kind of responses you get, the first one is, yeah, brilliant, let's fucking do it. Let's make sure that we can use our collective power, which is a good thing. That's a leftist position, to use collective power to be able to force economic change to benefit the working people, right? The second group of people is, well, I don't really know if I'll get on board if I don't think anybody else is going to do it, which is fair enough. But there is a class of people who are saying, well, you can do that if you want to, but think what it will do to your credit rating. Now, first of all, that's not necessarily going to happen, right? That only really happens if we're at the point at which, even after all of those pledges, the energy companies then don't do anything, and the government doesn't do anything to mitigate what's going to happen come October, come January, right? Which I think is unlikely if there are enough pledges there available. And second of all, yes, there will be some impact to people's livelihoods. There'll be some impact to new people's credit scores. There'll be some impact to for people's ability. Might have to go through some people have to go through court proceedings, right? But unfortunately, that's just the nature of direct political action. Let's be real. At the end of the day, right? You can't make an omelette without breaking a few eggs to get there. And to use a pretty tired idiom with regards to this. But at the end of the day, for some people, these hikes on energy bills, this isn't just going to be, oh, what my credit rating might go bad. They're like, I might have to choose in heating or eating. You might have older friends who might actually be at risk of death by having a cold house in winter because they can't afford to heat it, right? For some people, it's not about credit rating. For some people, it's about life or death situations, right? It's about their only livelihood that they're protecting. And some of us, right, to be able to make this collective action work for everyone to protect the people at the bottom who are most can be affected by this, I think that it's worth it. I think that if this campaign might drive future political change, then, whatever damage it might do to some people's credit scores is worth it in the long run to to agitate for the political change that we need, and second of all, to protect the people where the credit score is of no issue to them, right? We're all going to have to, collectively understand that there's going to be some backlash to this, but the overall goal, it is worth any detriment that it might happen on our end, right? That's just how direct action does work. If you go to a protest or you engage in agitation, some people get arrested. That's the risk that you have to take to be able to agitate for political change. And we on the left, we have to embrace that. As Slavoj Žižek will say, for change to happen, it will hurt, right? Be under no illusion, the change will hurt. But do we not realize how much damage is done and how much hurt is caused just to keep things the way that they are? And I think that's a really kind of wise quote to justify this situation, right? If we don't do anything, what's going to happen to these poor families? How much further can this dynamic go? How much are we going to be paying for energy bills if we continue to allow these companies to extract huge amounts of wealth from us to bolster their incredibly fat wallets? Enough. There's going to become a time when enough is enough, right? If the comparison, right, is that you look at France. That's the usual comparison that happens. I've talked about this before about the ability because the French understand the power of collective action. Like, remember les gilets jaunes, right? Where the yellow vests were out on the street protesting these kind of things, and they use collective power for good. People it's even a meme at this point that French will riot over everything, and maybe that's why their state energy provider has been able to limit energy increases to 4%, and we're lumped in with 50, 60, 70% increases, right? The reason why is because these are the people who've used their collective power, and we don't. We just accept it. Crabs in a bucket all over again, right? We just accept the fact that things aren't gonna work out the way that we want to, and then we just allow the people to step the boot on us. And maybe if the French are right, it's the same mentality when it comes to the strikes. And it's literally just like, my pay is getting worse, so everybody else's should. No. The collective action is how you bargain. It's how you bargain with these people. Otherwise, all you have to do is beg. And at the moment, we're just begging the government. We're having to beg the energy providers to help us through an incredibly obscene increase to people's overall energy bills, which that's not going to work. Begging's going to get you nowhere. And if we threaten to stop paying in the same way that we're threatening to stop working when we're striking, that's the only way that we're going to make them take notice, by actually hitting them where it hurts, rather than trying to appeal to their own kind of internal sense of duty to the social contract, which, of course, in the world of neoliberalism, none of them fucking believe in that shit. They don't believe they have some kind of higher social purpose. All they believe in is profit, because that's all they need. That's all they have. All they have is a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders to generate maximum profit. Any social or and kind of social externalities that happen across the wider populace, tough. Who gives a shit? Welcome to the neoliberal world of every man for themselves. That's it. That's all that really matters at the end of the day. Which is why it's so ridiculous that Labour are dropping their policy of energy nationalisation. Because again, the regulation hasn't worked. We've been shown from how captured Ofgem is by the sector that they're supposed to be regulating, right? And you're not going to just stop the people at the top of the energy companies from wanting to generate profit, because they have to. That is the system. You can't just change the people at the top or regulate to change that incentive structure. You have to have wholesale change in the structure. And what that means is the nationalization of the energy companies. Again, it's an inelastic market with elastic demand. It's a natural monopoly. The ability, like when Bulb went under, they had to get huge amounts of public subsidy to be able to get there in the first place, and then they had to get bailed out by the government when they went under, so that people still had to have energy bill and the actual energy supplied in the first place. And the executives who started Bubble, they left with fucking millions, whilst the public had to pick up the tab. It's not on. This has to stop. This privatization of energy hasn't worked. And the TUC, they might engage in some kind of general strike. There's been murmurs over there. There's a really good Environment Media episode about that, with Michael talking to Dave Ward about the ability for the trade union movement to have some kind of collective overall action that people can participate in, whether they're in a trade union or not, which I think is good. But at the end of the day, what we have to agitate for is a change to the system. But whilst we don't have that a strike is our only way of leveraging our collective action for change. And I think DontPayUK is really good in that regard. But what I will say is when I was on TikTok looking through this, I found an interesting response to DontPay from a different account. Apparently, he's been in contact with these guys about another way that we can use our collective power to undermine the power of the energy companies and to be able to impact them where it hurts to try and get some change. And that was to do with the complaint system and the Ombudsman. I didn't quite understand exactly what they were saying on TikTok, but luckily this guy called HELLSCAPE has put out a YouTube video called the DontPayUK FAQ about how this guy would change the way in which they're trying to operate to see if they can do a different kind of collective action. Now, don't get me wrong, I still think you shouldn't pay the energy bills if you're on direct debits, and we should still try and get those million pledges. But in the meantime, apparently this guy has another way of overloading the complaints process to cost these companies money. So I'm going to watch his full explanation on his YouTube channel. I'm going to pop the link to this guy's video in chat so that you can share it with people as well. And also so that you can give this guy some support, because again, I am basically piggybacking off his information that he's put out there as a streamer. So please do go and subscribe to him. Please do go and engage with the things that he has to say. Let's watch.
Hi all, and thanks for jumping over to the channel. I would have loved to put this on TikTok for you all, but I don't have access to 10-minute videos, and it would have been an absolute nightmare to try and go through this in little 3-minute segments. So thanks for jumping over. So first up, why you should pay. The system most suppliers use is called Kraken. This system is automated to reduce the need of manual workers, so a lot of the processes just tick over themselves with nobody really intervening. If you don't pay your bill, the system will automatically push you through the debt process. Depending on if you've been in the debt process before, you may be accelerated through this process. The outcomes are varied depending on your situation, but normally if your bill is between 30 to 60 days overdue, they will mark you as a late player with the credit reference agencies. Raising a complaint will delay this process, but it will not stop it. The money will still be due. Repeat non-payment will result in collection activity. This is calls and visits to your property to try and recover their money. If this fails, they will seek to install a prepayment meter and set the meter to recover the debt, forcing you to pay the minimum this can be set at is £3 per week on top of your consumption. If you have a smart meter, they can just send a message to it and it will change its type to prepayment remotely, and then they will send you a key or a card through the post. If you have traditional meters, they will try and book an appointment with you, and if you don't cooperate, they will get a warrant from the court and force access. Then the cost of the warrant will be added to your account too. I think this is around about £250, but it's been a long time since I was involved in that process, so it may have changed since then. Obviously, these are situations we would like to avoid, so if you can pay your bill, please do. If you can't, as part of your complaint, agree to a payment plan, and as long as you stick to that, the collections activity should stop. As part of the payment plan, they may ask you to do a declaration of earnings and expenditures to keep the payments as low as possible, especially if you're asking for a payment plan that is below your predicted usage. Chapter 2, the Ombudsman. A few people have said the Ombudsman are paid by the...
Actually, he brings up a pretty good point there, that with the advent of smart meters, the ability for them to change you from post-pay to prepay remotely, that does hurt the issue. So, it's difficult.
Suppliers and work for the suppliers. Also that they set the prices. This is partially correct. The Ombudsman is funded through the fines and charges to the suppliers, and they have to pay them. They by no means enjoy paying for the Ombudsman, and it's definitely not a choice. The Ombudsman is an independent regulator employed by the government to regulate the energy sector. They are not employed by the suppliers. In regard to the price, yes, Ofgem sets the price cap. This is the maximum that they can charge you. Suppliers are not obligated to charge you this amount. They choose to. They could charge you anything below the cap, they're just not allowed to exceed it. So, for example, when the price cap comes in October and they put the price cap up, suppliers are not obligated to put your prices up, they just will. One of the ways some suppliers try and creep your price up is through standing charge, which is not regulated. This is through the meter operator or meter asset manager, and this is a complex subject of its own, so let me know if you'd like me to go into more details. I'll do a separate video on it. So the third point, why complain? Every energy supplier and Ofgem themselves have SLAs they have to meet. SLA is service level agreement. Failure to achieve these are met with fines and restrictions.
I still think that if you don't have a smart meter, you should still make them go through that process, right? To be able to force, like, again, they can't just hire get a million people to go fit smart meters, right? We get like a million people who are on regular old meters. The amount of capital that it will have to be taken and the amount of new labour that will have to be taken to try and install smart meters in everybody's houses. Now that's something that you can overload them with, so I disagree on that point.
Some examples of these are 80% of complaints must be responded to within 72 hours, or 30% of complaints must be resolved on first contact. My point is, if we all cancel our direct debits on the 1st, sure we'll impact their cash flow a little bit, but ultimately people will pay to avoid the unpleasantness we covered in the first part of this video, so the impact will be minimal.
I mean, I think that depends how big the plan is, right? If you get loads of people who impact their cash flow, that can literally, depending on the retailer, can, essentially make them go bankrupt overnight, right? Or at least, it's difficult. Again, just depend on the supply, but loads of these businesses operate at incredibly tight margins on what they can and can't do with their cash flow. But I guess energy companies are probably too big to fail in that regard. As especially when you're in the summer and you're barely even using any energy, they've got to have that level of that float to be able to get them through the period in which people aren't really using much energy at all, which obviously we aren't right now because it's really fucking hot. But I digress.
Conversely, on the 1st, if 100,000 people raise complaints, that alone will blow their SLAs. They won't be able to keep up and they'll be risking a fine. To give you an idea of some of the fines that Ofgem's recently issued, Scottish Power was fined £18 million for failings in customer service, British Gas was fined £2.5 million for mishandling customer complaints, Npower was fined £2 million for the mishandling of customer complaints, and also I think it was SSE was fined £2.05 million for keeping wholesale market information to themselves. These are a few years back, and Ofgem has changed the way they give fines to a percentage of the company's yearly revenue, so it's going to sting a lot more. On top of that, even if 10% get through to being Ombudsman complaints, the cost will be staggering for them. Chewing through all of these complaints on top of the normal complaints will take a while. All the time, they will be outside of their SLA. Now, I appreciate what people have said about obviously affecting the people that have got genuine complaints, but at some point we have to take a stand.
I mean, 100%. Like, yeah, again, there's going to be at least some people who are going to be negatively affected by this, but everyone gets negatively affected by the amount to which the bills are going up. So, again, the small amount of people who are going to get that we all have to essentially take collective action. Some of us will get hurt worse than others, but the overall, the goal is higher, and I think that's worth fighting for. And I think that this guy does agree that you have to take a stand eventually.
Because of the way that the system is set up to affect our credit ratings, and the way the system is set up to benefit the supplier being able to force entry to our properties and install prepayment meters, forcing us to pay for the energy before we consume it, we're not set up in a position to fight back in any other way but through the complaints process. So
again, that does entirely depend on the level to which people engage in the consumer strike, right? If it gets to the point at which there are so many people that literally cannot get enough warrants to be able to install prepayment meters, then that's the kind of that point of inflection, right?
Remember, there's also three parts to an energy system: the generation, the distribution, and the supply. Often suppliers will show that they make little or no money on residential properties, and this is true. However, on their business tariffs, the distribution and generation, they're making billions. It's like the old cup game. They want you to look in the wrong place for the money. That's why Shell and British Gas have made record-breaking profits this year. They hide it all in the generation and distribution side of the business so you can't see it, and they can continue to claim that there isn't enough money to reduce the costs. There is. It's just tied up in the generation and distribution that they charge to the supplier to make the supplier look like they have no money. This is not true. Alone you're a quiet voice in a large field, but together you can invoke change. Nothing I've said here is private knowledge, it's in your energy contract and written in the supplier code of conduct on the Ofgem page. They just make it very difficult for you to actually break it down into digestible chunks. Some quick.
And that's again, like, they try and get you lost in the bureaucracy. They're going to get lost in all of the small print, so that you don't understand the ability that the ways in which you can impact them, right? The ways in which you can beat the system yourself, because the only people who know all of the ins and outs are people on the inside already.
Googling will validate my points. It goes without saying I share this information to try and help direct your voice in the right direction. The advisors on the calls or that respond to you don't deserve abuse. They're most
Fucking true. As somebody who works in a call centre, please never do that.
likely in the same situation, so keep it cordial and polite, please. When you raise a complaint, ask for a copy of the complaints handling procedure to be sent to you. This pamphlet outlines exactly how your complaint will be handled and your rights in relation to taking it to the Ombudsman. I ask you to do this because my knowledge is outdated. I've been out of industry for about 3 years now, so I don't know if my information is up to date, and I would prefer you get the information directly from the source. Best of luck everyone, and I hope you work your way through it. I'm currently looking into the fuel issue as well, and I will update if I find anything worth mentioning. Goodbye.
So yeah, I definitely agree with that. And even if we still go through with the actual consumer strike on payment, engaging in the overloading of the complaints process is something that you absolutely should do as well. You complain, and then you get it escalated to the Ombudsman. Again, follow this person at HELLSCAPE. I'm going to give them a subscription now as well. Find this video, find their channel, and let's get this blown up, right? Let's make sure that he understands. So that people understand, what he's saying here and what we can engage in. Even if we don't get the amount of pledges that we do get for non-payment, we can still get people to engage in this one as well. Because people are less scared of something like this because you can continue paying and avoid, adverse impacts to credit if you do this too. I think we should do both, but if you're going to do one, at least do this, right? 100%, that's correct. And I'll be definitely dropping. I'm going to upload this to YouTube. Going to drop this video in the description and this guy's channel. Go like his video. Go and subscribe. Go and watch it again to get him some watch time. Let's blow this up, absolutely. Should this video also blow up itself. Last of all, I want to make a point on this. Leftists, if you're still watching this, this is what you need to do. Because my channel is mostly for leftists. If for some reason this goes out of my own little political bubble, then so be it. But this is going to be my call to liberals as well, I guess. If you're a leftist and you're watching this right now, and you're frustrated with what's happening in the kind of political establishment, we have no representation in the Commons. We have no representation on the electoral field, right? We were never going to. The system is rigged against us. There was no way of us going to be able to make meaningful change right here and now. Like, we showed in the Corbyn years that we were swimming against an incredibly strong opposing tide. And we always think, well, how do we turn around, liberals' minds on these things, right? And it's not going to be through politicians. It's going to be through collective action. It's going to be through these turning points, these huge moments in history. We think, well, how are we ever going to get, democratic socialism in our lifetime? And it's going to involve a wide movement. You're going to have to get people on board that way. And the way you're going to get people on board is by taking these moments and using it as an educational tool for your for your friends, for the apolitical, right? People who don't really have a current political ideology. But these people will understand the impact of what's happening on their bills. The cost of living crisis is a perfect recruitment moment. Remember the George Floyd protests? Remember how people were just sick of watching their friends getting killed by police? Right? Didn't matter how politically motivated they are. None of them were leftists. They weren't socialists. They weren't communists. They were just regular, normal members of the public who were tired of shit not changing. Right? These are the same kind of people that we can reach with regards to the cost of living crisis. Because at the end of the day, as I said at the start, you know whose fault this is? It's the energy company's fault. Right? They don't have to put the prices up to the price cap, but they will do. Because they have only one driving force, and that is their interest in profit. That is taking as much money from you as they can, without there being civil unrest. And as I said, we could be rioting in the streets. We could be engaging in this collective action. But I don't know, because people don't do it. People don't do it in this country. And because, well, the reason they don't do it is because we don't explain to them why they're in the position that we're in. And we're in this position because of capital accumulation and the desire for profit. This has to stop, and it has to change. And by using this as a teaching moment for your fellow liberals, by saying, no, reform won't work. You can't reform the system out of what it's doing, because it is explicitly set up in the way that it functions to make this scenario inevitable. Explain to these people why, if the CEO of Centrica or the CEO of all of these other companies who are making a killing off of the increase in your bills that's going to be happening, if these people started being altruistic and deliberately put their prices down, even though they absolutely could put their prices up and people would have to keep paying to keep the lights on, they would get fired. They have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders to maximize profit. That is how the system works, and that's why it can't be reformed. So you can go and find these people, these reformists who think that it can change without nationalization. You can go and tell them, bring them in, say, look, no, with these kind of things, and with lots of society, right? The people that get hurt, the people at the bottom, working class people like me and you, liberals watching, you know what I'm saying makes sense. You know that it can't be reformed, and you know that if it were back into public control, and we all owned it, right? We own that shit, right? It can be used to benefit the people, and not to benefit shareholders, to benefit CEOs, to benefit the people who already have the ability to be able to sort out themselves, right? We're seeing this kind of general public solidarity with the rail strikes. They're incredibly popular, right? People like the BBC went out, they couldn't find a single person who condemned the rail strikes, right? This is a teachable moment. The TUC Join Union website has seen more traffic than it has done in decades and decades and decades, right? I guess a couple of decades since we've had the internet, right? But more traffic than it's ever seen in its entire existence, because people understand, right? You need to get people involved, get people joining unions, tell them about socialism, tell them about leftism, get them to understand the underlying principles that have caused the crisis that we're in at the moment, right? Use these kind of turning points in history, these points at which things start bubbling over. We think, right, that it's going to be a gradual process, and really, societal change happens like that. There are years in which nothing happens, and in weeks in which years happen, right? We need to be there with a base available of people who understand these problems to be able to support us when these things happen. So when the next cost of living crisis comes along, when the next corporate conglomeration of money gets massively recognised by the public, we will be there with the answer for people, and we will have the base of people who've been radicalised by the previous one to be able to agitate for that change, so that we don't have to use Twitter and the social media to try and say, well, maybe we might get some kind of consumer strike. We will have the solidarity there ready. People will immediately ready to down tools and say, we're going on strike. We're not paying. We're gonna make your life hell as an energy retailer by overloading your complaint system. These people will be there ready, and that's why this is an incredibly teachable moment. Sure, political firebrands, people like Jeremy Corbyn, people like Sam Tarry, people like John McDonnell, who use their platforms to speak about these issues on TV and such like that. Sure, they do good work. They'll act as beacons with which to be able to get people understanding the crux of these issues. But they're only a small part of it. And some people don't pay. Most people don't watch the news. They don't engage in politics, but they do pay their energy bills, right? This is where you need to get them. This is why you need to talk to people, right? Find local groups full of people that local advocacy groups, all that kind of stuff. Start your own. Get involved on social media in your real life. Don't be preachy. Don't come to, I have this amazing idea. I have to come and listen to me right now. Look, get talking. If the thing moves around to energy bills, just be like, well, unfortunately, these people will have to drive for profit, so there's nothing we can really do unless the government act. And then suddenly their eye turns to the government. It stops being about we just have to live with it. It starts being let's agitate for political change. These are where these turning points happen. And so if you're still watching leftists, first of all, like and subscribe, leave a comment, do all the old engagement stuff. But second of all, remember this moment. Remember these kind of huge moments in British history, and use it as a tool to radicalize your friends. And with that, I do appreciate you for watching. Go do all the algorithm stuff. If you want to go into the link in the description, go follow the guy whose YouTube video I watched. Go subscribe, go like his video, go watch it again. You can also follow me on Twitch, and you can also subscribe on Patreon if you want to give me your cold hard cash. And also join a union as well. You do that because the unions apparently are going to be putting together some kind of general strike moving forward too, and using these moments to base build and to get people involved in collective action means that they will also be there for the next general strike as well, and they might also join a union. So use this as a teaching moment, and I'll catch you on the next one.